Welcome back to my channel. I'm Veronica with Nurturing Connections Homeschool, where I share resources and planners to help you connect with what matters most. Now, this particular year, I am doing high school for the very first time, and one of the curriculums that we are currently using for high school is World History by Generations. So I have shared in the past about our experiences with Generations curriculums as far as science is concerned, but I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to also share with you what their history curriculum has been like for us. If you're not familiar with Generations curriculums, they have a number of resources on their website where they share curriculums for literature and reading. They share curriculums for science and worldview and history. And it's something that I've just really come to love. I love the perspective that they share. I love that everything is Christ-centered and that it is biblically sound. And so that has been so very good for me in my own faith journey. But it's also really helped as I have taught my son this world history course to really understand why we believe what we believe. So I'm going to share with you an overview of what you'll find there. I'm going to kind of flip through along the way so you can see what's inside. And then I'll share my general thoughts and how we're using it in our particular homeschool. So if you go and check out their world history course, you're going to see there are 3 parts to it. So you have this first book called Preparing the World for Jesus, a survey of the world before Christ. This is over 500 pages. Then you have this textbook, which is Taking the World for Jesus, the remarkable story of the greatest commission. This is over 360 pages long. And then you have the student workbook that includes both of these texts in a workbook format. So you have questions and so forth that I'll go over with you in just a bit. So we just started the very first textbook here. This is Preparing the World for Jesus, and it begins at the beginning. So it begins with creation. It talks about creation and the fall. It discusses the flood. It's going to get into the Tower of Babel. All of that is in here, all the way down to the Romans, gladiator games, and all of that. So I have kind of skimmed through some of this because I have found it so very interesting. And I think for me, what has been most eye-opening has just been how he has been able to capture what the pagan world looked like and why there was even a need for the Savior. Why did Jesus even have to come? I think that in a lot of secular resources, or the way I was taught history, it's almost like ancient peoples are glamorized in a sense. So for example, when I looked at Romans, you know, in other books, they talk about the Romans and you dress up like a Roman and you eat food like Romans and you, I don't know, build the Roman places and so forth, and it's a lot of fun and you do all these hands-on activities, but then down deep somewhere you'll see, and the Romans had these gladiator games and they killed a lot of Christians in the end. And it's a little blurb and you don't really get to see that bigger picture. And what I have found in here is that he is laying it all out there and saying, this is what sinful man looks like without Jesus. This is what people were doing. This is how they acted. They did not value human life. They did not see humans as image bearers of the Lord. And because they didn't value it, they thought it was entertaining to watch people get killed. They thought death was something to, you know, pay some money and go watch a show and experience it firsthand. You see evidence of child sacrifice and abortions and just sexual perversions and all of these sinful things that man did during this time in these pagan societies that was quote unquote normal. They would burn widows. You're reading this and it's just terrible. It's terrible to see. But what I love throughout this is it keeps coming back to Jesus. This is why we needed Jesus. This is why Jesus came for us. This is why there was a judgment, God's judgment on the people. But it doesn't just do that. It also takes it a step further and it tells you this isn't just what happened, this is how we know it happened. So for example, when we were studying the flood and Noah's Ark, it was talking about the flood stories all around the world, that all of these different cultures in remote parts of the world had some sort of oral storytelling or a written account even of the global flood. And they even compared it here, like these stories. And although, it's kind of like telephone, that game where one person shares something and it kind of changes along the way. These people may not have had the Bible, but yet they still found that this global flood was in 95% of those flood stories. They found that in 88% of them, a family was favored and saved. In 66% of them, the cause of the flood was man's wickedness. And so they compare these flood stories and they show you some examples of them. And it's mind-blowing to see how in China they had this one story that was so unbelievably close to the biblical account without the Bible itself. It goes into the Epic of Gilgamesh and so forth. So it's also, in my opinion, an apologetics course. You're not going to just get these facts. You're going to get why they're facts. Why is this true? How do we know this is true? And he provides so much evidence in this particular text. So I have found that extremely interesting. It goes beyond the, here's this what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, the end. He keeps bringing out that bigger picture. This is why it's important, and this is how we know it's true. So when you open the book, you're going to notice there's a lot of beautiful photography in it, a lot of great explanations in it. You'll see like some scriptural references there throughout. There's some artwork. There is, again, photography. You're going to see timelines at the end of each chapter. So I'll go ahead and pull that. You'll have tables that explain things further. The connection, for example, to Day of the Dead and how a lot of this originated because of the global flood and all the death that took place there. It's just, to me, been mind-blowing to see all this. But at the end of each chapter, you also have the timeline review, and then you have a prayer there that is specific to the content that you read in that chapter. So that is how each chapter is organized. Again, you have some maps along the way, and the explanations and the information, what they look like, how they worshiped, all of that, and why we needed Jesus, why we needed a Savior, why he was so important. So I have absolutely enjoyed this with my son. We have some great conversations. We are digging into those connections and how, as we're seeing all these events unfolding in our modern day world, how they go back to the roots here of what took place in pagan societies, as we are seeing our country kick out God, taking him out of the schools years ago, taking him out of entertainment, taking him out of TVs and shows, or the moral compass that he provided in his word for us. As we are removing more and more of that, we are seeing that flood, if you will, of moral degradation, of depravity, of all of these pagan practices resurfacing in our country. And when you go back and you read about it and you see there's nothing new under the sun, this has been, and it went away and we were protected because of Jesus. But if we turn our backs like the Israelites did, then we are just as capable of this lifestyle and this sin as they were. And so that is where this one comes in, where it just really talks about how everything changed when Jesus came on board. And so you have the Roman Empire and you have the influence of that Roman Empire. But then as you see here, Christianity begins in that small place, and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. And as Christianity spread, then you started to see this shift in the world. And so as an example, as I was reading here, it was talking about this practice in India where they would burn widows after their husbands would die. And so every year, over 600 widows were burned alive because of this practice that they had, the way they treated the elderly and so forth. So anyways, they did that there until missionaries went out there and they shared the gospel with them, and they changed their laws to protect the women. And this was in the 1800s. And so, pulling these pieces together, just seeing why Christianity is so important. A table that I saw in here too was in the countries where Christianity is more prevalent, you have less corruption, you have more prosperity in many ways. And so seeing that connection between what God says is true and it being played out in these countries, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I love it. I'm learning so much, like I said, just seeing the work of the church and the work of God throughout history. This is his story, has just been so good. So something to keep in mind, this is not going to go into the accomplishments of man per se, like the pyramids and talking about the pyramids on and on and on. It does recognize them, but it goes back to what were they really there for and how our God is greater than all that. So just something to keep in mind if you're looking for something more traditional, if you want to know more about World War I and World War II and you want to just get into that, you're not going to find as much of that here. What you're going to find is hope. You're going to find this is what happened without Jesus, but God. And this is what he's doing. And this is how we know his promises are true. So that's what you're going to find in here that I have found encouraging and has been so very good for us. This is the student workbook. It is broken down by lessons, and so you can see there day 1, day 2, all the way through. It gives them what to read and then the worksheets that they would do after the reading in order to check their comprehension. So I'm going to kind of skip over to where we haven't gotten just yet. And you can see some examples here. There are study questions. A lot of them are open-ended, so the child, or the student, I should say, has the opportunity to just really make those connections, see if they understand the content. There's usually some scriptures to look up, some things to consider, some things to pray about. There are timeline exercises as well as map exercises, so you are getting some geography in there too. And then every so often you will have an exam that is in here too. So all of that, you can kind of follow the lessons if you choose, and you can keep the grades there as well. And at the end, you can easily get a grade for your transcript if you choose to use it this way. I've really enjoyed it. Altogether, Generations recommends that this is 1 high school credit. But of course, if you are homeschooling in a state where you have a little bit more flexibility, you can alter that as necessary. I know for me personally, I will most likely do this as year 1 and then follow up with year 2. And so we might do some more deep dives because that's what we're doing now. We're going to flesh it out with some activities along the way, doing some research projects along the way. And so I'm just going to take my time with this. I'm not going to rush through it and try to do it all in 1 year. I really, really like the opportunity to just dive in, talk about these things, and go from there. So that's how we're using it. We've enjoyed it. But other than that, I hope this was helpful for you. If you'd like to see anything further, please let me know in the comments below. I just thought I'd share with you just because I'm so excited about all that we're learning right now. Other than that, I'd appreciate a thumbs up on your way out, and I hope to see you here next time. Thanks for watching.